HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Ditch, a novel, by Herman Koch, read by Gildart Jackson. Part 1. Chapter 1. Let me call her Sylvia. That's not her real name. Her real name would only confuse things. People make all kinds of assumptions when it comes to names, especially when a name isn't from around here, when they don't have a clue about how to pronounce it, let alone spell it. So let's just say that it's not a Dutch name. My wife is not from Holland. Where she is from is something I'd rather leave up in the air for the time being. Those in our immediate surroundings, of course, know where she's from, and people who read the newspaper and watch the news with any regularity can't really have missed it either. But most people have bad memories. They may have heard it once, then forgotten. Robert Walter, his wife's foreign, right? Yes, that's right. She's from... Come on, help me out here. People associate all kinds of things with countries of origin. To each country its own prejudices. It starts as soon as you get to Belgium. Do I need to repeat here the kinds of prejudices we Dutch people have when it comes to Belgians? When it comes to the Germans, the French, the Italians? Go a bit farther east and a bit farther south, and the people gradually change colour. At first it's only their hair, it gets darker, and finally it turns black altogether. After that, the same process repeats itself, but now with their skin. To the east it turns yellower, to the south it gets blacker and blacker. And it gets hotter. South of Paris the temperature starts to rise. When the weather's hot it becomes a lot harder to work. One feels more like sitting in the shade of yonder palm. Even farther south one stops working altogether. Mostly one just takes a breather. When our daughter was born, the name Sylvia was the second on our list of names. The second on a list of 3, the name we would have given her if we hadn't named her Diana. Or, to put it differently, if we'd had 3 daughters instead of only 1, they would have been named Diana, Sylvia, and Julia. We also had 3 names ready for any boys who came along, but I won't list them here. We don't have boys. We also don't have daughters. We have only Diana. It's probably clear to you by now that Diana isn't our daughter's real name either. First of all, for reasons of privacy, she has to be able to live a life of her own, which is hard enough already when a girl has a father like me. But it's no coincidence that all 3 of those names have 3 syllables, and that they all end in an A. When it came time to choose our daughter's name, her real name, I made a concession. I felt that my wife had a tough enough time of it as it was, in a country not her own, that I shouldn't go burdening her on top of all that with a daughter with a Dutch name. It would be a name from her country, a girl's name she could say out loud each day, a familiar name, a warm sound in the midst of all that harsh gargling and bleak hawking we call the Dutch language. The same goes for my wife's name. In addition to her person, I also fell in love right away with her name. I say it as often as I can. Long ago, too, in the middle of the night, all on my lonesome in the boarding-house where I had to spend the night because there was no room for me at her parents'. It's something in the sound of it, somewhere between melting chocolate and a wood fire, in terms of the taste and the aroma. When I don't call her by her first name, I call her sweetheart. Not in Dutch, no. In Dutch I'd have a hard time getting the word out of my mouth. Only ironically at best, as in, but, sweetheart, you should have thought about that beforehand. Sweetheart in my wife's language, though, sounds precisely the way sweetheart should sound, like the name of a dessert, or more like a hot, sticky beverage that leaves a warm, tingling trail behind as it goes down your throat. But also like the warmth of a blanket someone lays over your shoulders. Come to me now, sweetheart. My wife, Sylvia, her new name is starting to grow on me, is from a country that shall remain unnamed for the time being, a country about which a lot of preconceived notions exist, notions both favourable and unfavourable. From passionate and temperamental, it's only a small step to hot-tempered. A crime passionnel, the term says it already, is a crime we tend to situate more readily in the south and east than in northern climes. In some countries they just happen to lose their tempers more quickly than we do. At first it's only voices shouting in the night, but then suddenly there is the glint of moonlight on a drawn blade. The standard of living is lower there, the discrepancies between rich and poor are immense, stealing is viewed with more sympathy than in our country, but the culprits are viewed with less. They consider themselves lucky if the police get to them before the injured party arrives to settle accounts. I myself am absolutely not free of preconceived notions. In light of my official capacity, though, I'm supposed to be, and I just happen to make a good show of it. In the last few years I've had a cup of tea, or a beer, or something stronger, with every minority group our city has on offer. I've swung along with music not my own, raised a slice of some vague meat dish to my lips, but that doesn't make me free of prejudices. I've always cherished my preconceived notions as something bound up inextricably with my own person, or, to put it more precisely, without those prejudices I would have been a different person. That, in the first instance, is how I look at the foreigner, with the naturally suspicious eye of the farmer who sees a stranger entering his yard. Is the stranger coming in peace, or shall I turn the dogs on him? But now something has happened that has thrown everything for a loop, something with my wife. Something that perhaps has more to do with her country of origin, her place of birth, than I care to admit. With her cultural background, I venture cautiously, in order to say nothing of that dubious concept of national character, at least not for the time being. I ask myself to what extent I can hold her responsible, and to what extent it might be the fault of her native country. I wonder whether I'm capable of telling the two apart, whether I ever will be capable of that, whether I would have reacted differently if Sylvia had been just another Dutch woman. Sometimes a prejudice can serve as a mitigating circumstance, sometimes as a damning one. That's just the way those people are. It's in their blood. What it is precisely that is in their blood, well, everyone can fill that in for themselves. The thievery, the knife-fighting, the lying, the wife-beating, the bashing of other population groups that don't belong in their backwood village, the cruel games with animals, the religious customs involving the shedding of blood, the intentional mutilation of one's own body, the overabundance of gold teeth, the arranged marriages of sons and daughters, but on the other hand, also, the food that tastes so much better than it does here, the parties that go on all night, the sense of we only live once, tomorrow we may die, the music that seems much more stirring, more melancholy, closer to the heart, the men who let their eye fall on a woman and can never be discouraged, the women who want one specific man, only that one. You can see it in their gaze, in the fire in their eyes. But when they catch their husband with another woman, they jam a knife between his ribs or cut off his balls while he's asleep. And that's as it should be, too, I think to myself. I, who try to remain free of prejudices, but am not, and never have been either. And what if those prejudices suddenly turn against you? How do you react then? As the Dutchman who wants to be seen as tolerant of other peoples and cultures, or as something a little more in line with the country of origin, with the national character of the other. Until now, the two have always been good bedfellows. Night after night I've shared my bed with those preconceived notions. But what if you wake up early one morning to find the sheets beside you cold and unused? It is still dark. Through the curtains a crack of light from a street lamp shines on the turned-back feather bed. What time is it, for God's sake? She should have been home ages ago. You prick up your ears. You hear bare feet padding down the hallway, but it's your daughter, who's now knocking on the bedroom door. "Where's Mamma?" she asks. "I don't know," you answer, truthfully. Chapter 2. It happened at the New Year's reception on Thursday, January the 16th. "Why does it have to be so late in the month?" I asked the first time after my appointment, and at least once more after that. "Why so far along into the new year, just when we're breathing a sigh of relief because the New Year's receptions are, at least for another year, over at last?" I've forgotten what the exact answer was. Something about tradition. "That's the way we've always done it." I recall the city manager replying vaguely. The former city manager, that is. One of our first tasks in the new year was to find a suitable replacement for him. He shrugged as he said it, but in his eyes I saw something else. "Because that's why," is what his look said, as though speaking to a child who wants to know why it can't go outside and play for 5 minutes before dinner. Everyone was there. Of the triad, which is what they call the three-man team of police commissioner, district attorney, and myself, I caught sight only of the DA. He was standing beside the table full of hors d'oeuvres, sliding a handful of salt peanuts or cocktail snakes into his mouth. On the table were wooden serving trays with cheese cubes and platters with pieces of raw herring that had little cocktail sticks with red, white, and blue Dutch flags stuck into them. As far as I could tell at a glance, all the aldermen were already there, and most of the council members too. For the rest, a few representatives of trade and industry, people from the art world, the club presidents of Ajax. Without a doubt, at some point, he was going to start in about the national championship celebration. About last year's celebration, to be more precise, which, for the third year in a row, had been held in an open lot beside the Amsterdam Arena, jammed in between the Heineken Music Hall and the office tower of Deutsche Bank. Arena Boulevard sucks in air like a wind tunnel. The tower and the stadium do the rest. On calm days, it's the ideal playground for wind funnels and mini tornadoes. Sand, newspaper, empty French fry and hamburger containers are drawn into the air. There they hang, orbiting around until the wind gets bored and smacks them down a few 100 meters farther, often enough right on the heads of the shoppers headed for Mediamarkt, Decathlon, and Perry Sport. Catcalls had been my due, and rightly so. I realized that it had been a hopeless error of judgment on my part, that I had given in too quickly to the arguments advanced by the other two members of the triad, the city, downtown, the safety risks. Of course, a team that has just won the national championship should have its victory celebration downtown, at Leitzerplein, on the balcony of the Municipal Theatre, players and trainer holding aloft the Champions' Cup for the cheering supporters to admire. But in preceding years, those celebrations had all ended in disturbances. Smashed bus shelters, concrete planters thrown through shop windows, looting, groups of drunken and high hooligans climbing the light towers. And then, as the crowning touch, like in a western when the cavalry arrives at the fort beleaguered by Indians, the charge is carried out by the mounted police. Potentially fatal situations had arisen. That was how the next day's papers quoted the police commissioner. Things could have spun even further out of control, serious injuries, perhaps even a fatality. Hence, the vacant lot with whirlwinds. Not much to vandalize there. Arena Boulevard, with its tempting array of plate-glass windows, could easily be blocked off by a few platoons of riot police. That was a lot harder in downtown Amsterdam, with its tangle of narrow streets and alleyways. But despite the red flares and the smoke, the celebration really did look horribly dismal, with the beats of Bob Marley's Three Little Birds drifting away feebly amid the office towers. That's how it seemed to me, especially when I played back the news footage that evening, footage that would travel around the world. Ajax may no longer have been the superpower it was in the 1970s and mid-1990s, but it was still very much a legendary club, one whose name was spoken with respect. The whole world would see that Holland's best soccer club was celebrating its championship on a dismal concrete lot. My wife always goes with me to the New Year's reception, even though she detests them. In fact, she detests all occasions that smack of officialdom. Sylvia has never wanted to be the wife of, the woman in the shadows. She prefers to live her own life, and we try to keep her public appearances to a minimum. But the New Year's reception is an exception. She knows how bored I get at things like that. It's inevitable. The glass in the hand, the dish of salted nuts, the babbling on about nothing. And I know that other people can see it miles away, too. My desire to get out of there as quickly as possible shines right through me. "Just tell me if you want me to go along," she always says. "If you really want me to be there, then I will. For you." That's how we divided up our roles. That's our agreement. As soon as I put on my most pitiful expression and look at her with the hammy, imploring look that I save for special occasions, Sylvia knows how things stand. I never have to say anything more. "Okay, don't start crying," she says. "I'll go along. What should I wear?" Foreign heads of state I can deal with on my own. The opening of a new subway station, the farewell party for a museum director, a symphony conductor's 70th birthday. The heads of state tend to walk around looking a little forlorn. By the time they get here, they've already spent half the day in The Hague in the company of our Prime Minister. But after that half a day, the visiting head of state and our Prime Minister clearly have nothing more to say to each other. The boredom hangs in the air like an odourless but deadly gas. I feel sorry for them, for the heads of state. I, too, have spent the occasional half-day with the Prime Minister. No, not half a day, a couple of hours at most. During a dinner, a boat tour of the canals, a film premiere. You toss a coin in his slot and something always rolls out, but rarely anything useful. You've got people like that. You talk to them and they answer you right away, a little too readily, perhaps. They don't take time to think about it. Maybe they're afraid of silence. I don't know. Even half a second of silence seems to feel like an eternity to them. In any case, I'm not the only one. After a few hours in the company of our Prime Minister, the foreign heads of state go looking for someone else too, for a breath of fresh air. Now it's time for me to tell you something about myself, something which, lacking proper explanation, might sound like pure vanity, but which definitely isn't that. I'll try to stick to the facts. Fact is, for example, that you won't feel bored any too quickly when I'm around. I see the way the heads of state cast about. They may be standing beside the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but they're dying to get out of there. They've stopped listening already. Mostly they wear this glassy-eyed stare. Maybe what they really feel like doing is taking a little nap, but, that being out of the question, they'll settle for a double vodka or a cigarette out on the balcony. All I have to do is wait until that restless, glassy-eyed look settles on me. You can set your watch by it. I radiate it. I don't have to put any effort into it at all. It's written all over my face that I've had enough of this too, that I'm just as fed up as they are. They step away from the circle of blowhards and come over to me. "Mr. Mayor," they start in. They've forgotten my name, of course, but I don't hold that against them. "Robert, call me Robert," I say, and nod toward the balcony door at the far end of the room. "Want to pop out for a smoke?" I quit smoking 20 years ago, but I always have a pack and a lighter on me for emergencies. On our way to the balcony, I catch the eye of one of the waiters walking around with trays of red or white wine, water, and fresh squeezed orange juice. "Maybe you'd like something else," I say to the head of state. "Vodka, whiskey, maybe a little brandy." "I'll have a double vodka," I tell the waiter, just to help the head of state along a little. "From the freezer, if you've got it, otherwise on the rocks. We'll be out there on the balcony." No, when it comes to visits from presidents, premiers, lord mayors, and royal families from abroad, I can get along without my wife's company. Sometimes I give in, though, when she makes it clear that she would actually love to go along. When Barack Obama came to town, for example. "If Obama comes, you have to promise me to take me along," she said. "And why should I asked, purely for form's sake, because I knew the answer already. "He just happens to be a good-looking man, darling," she said. "Women all think he's good-looking." "Like George Clooney?" I asked. "Like George Clooney," my wife said, "although I can't really feature Barack Obama doing an espresso commercial." In any case, when members of the royal family come to Amsterdam, I always want to have Sylvia at my side. I don't know what it is, but I literally dummy up whenever I'm around that white wine slurping, beer guzzling, and chain smoking family. I start breathing audibly. I start developing itches in places it would be incommodious to scratch, like having a mosquito bite under a plaster cast. I start sweating. The rings of perspiration form on my shirt, and that realization makes me sweat only harder. I go to the toilet, unbutton my shirt, and using a few paper towels, do my best to wipe down my chest, armpits, and stomach. I try to stay away as long as possible. I lock myself up in a cubicle and read the news on my iPhone without a single item actually getting through to me. "God," I whisper to myself, "let this day pass from me," or words to that effect. It's the same thing that happens with movies sometimes. After 10 minutes, you know it's not going anywhere. You need to get out of there, but you stay in your seat anyway. Maybe it will get better later on, you tell yourself, while every fibre of your being has already tensed for the impending escape. With Sylvia at my side, though, it's bearable. She's an easy talker. All her countrymen are easy talkers. It comes as naturally to them as breathing. She asks the princess, who is the queen these days, where she bought her shoes. With the prince, currently our king, she has a good long talk about pheasant hunting. It helps that people in her native culture view hunting differently than we do here, more liberally. In my wife's country, the fact that the meat on our plates comes from living animals is in sharper focus than it is with us. Probably, I sometimes allow myself to think, because it was less long ago that people there had to hunt in order to eat. So here's what happened at the New Year's reception. I did indeed find myself locked in conversation with the president of Ajax. My wife announced that she was going for a quick look at the hors d'oeuvre. "Can I bring you to something?" she asked before she left, but we both shook our heads. Less than a minute later, I had just assured the president that any celebration this year would take place downtown, no matter what, regardless of any objections from the other two members of the triad. I looked around and saw her, not close to the table of hors d'oeuvre, but more to the back of the room, close to the door that led to the central corridor of City Hall and the toilet blocks. The person she was talking to had his back half turned to me. A man, I saw, but I couldn't tell right away who it was. But when Sylvia raised her bottle of beer and clinked it against his, and when the man then turned and glanced around the room, I saw that it was Alderman Martin van Hoogstraten. "We as a club would of course be delighted if it could all take place downtown again," I heard the soccer club president saying close to my ear, "and we'll do all we can to make sure everything proceeds in an orderly fashion. Rioting, of course, is not good advertising for the Ajax brand." "The city is what I'm aiming for, too," I said. "Of course, we'll have to wait and see, but this would make it the 5th championship in a row. Special attention will be paid to that, here but also abroad. So we don't want to see footage of a dismal concrete lot. We want to see canals, the Rijksmuseum, the concert hall, the city theatre." I counted to 3, then took another look at the spot close to the door at the back of the room. At that very moment my wife tossed back her head and laughed. The alderman had his hand on her elbow and was whispering something in her ear. "Well, now that you mention it," the president said, "we've been talking because it would indeed be the 5th time about doing something special, a boat procession through the canals, for instance." Now Sylvia looked around, her gaze sweeping the crowd. Was she looking for me? Or was she only making sure that no one was watching her and the alderman? For a full half-second I was sure that our gazes crossed, but the next moment Sylvia was already looking away. "I won't say that I'd already thought of that," I said, "but a boat parade is exactly what I had in mind. Thousands of people along the quays. The television viewer in France, Italy, China, and America gets a glorious view of Amsterdam. We want helicopters to fly over and film the city too. But if you'll excuse me, we can talk more about this later on. Right now, I really have to—" I pointed to an imaginary someone who wanted to talk to me, someone in the vicinity of the hors d'oeuvre, someone who had supposedly caught my eye. "Of course, go right ahead. You have other things to see to. I'm already very pleased to hear this. Can I discuss it with the board, or would that be premature?" "Hold off on that a bit. I want to run it past the triad first, for form's sake, but I'll let you know as soon as I can." I took a few steps to one side, toward the snack table. Then I cut left, keeping my head down so that no one would detain me. I edged my way through the crowd. "Martin," I said. "Robert." I had approached my wife and the alderman from an angle. With my last step forward, I placed myself in their field of vision. "Getting bored?" my wife asked. I took a good look at her face. I searched for signs of anything you might consider out of the ordinary, a slight blush, a batting of the lashes, or even only an undisguisable irritation at the fact that I had come to interrupt their cosy little tete-a-tete. "Yes, I'm bored," I said. "I feel like going home pretty soon." "But we just got here." Martin van Hoogstraten looked at me. I was expecting him to look at Sylvia too, but he didn't. "I was just leaving," the alderman said. "I still have to." "I was actually out to get a drink for Lodewijk. I should have gone back to him a long time ago." He raised his hand to my wife's elbow, touched her briefly. "Sylvia," he said. Then he clinked his beer bottle against mine. "Robert," and then he was gone. "We're going," I said. "But you can't just do that, can you?" "Oh, yes, I can. If you go to the restroom first, then I'll come 5 minutes later. Behind the toilet blocks is the service staircase. We go down 2 flights and we're outside." "Is something wrong, Robert? Aren't you feeling well?" "I feel fine, but I'm fed up. It just isn't my day. And we've done it before, Sylvia. Remember Bernard and Christine's wedding?" "Yes, and the coronation." "During the reception, after the wedding of my best friend and his 3rd wife, we had first gone to hide in one of the side rooms. Then, 5 minutes apart, we had snuck out to the street on the canal side, And during Willem Alexander's coronation we had found a side door. We ran the first part of the way, then ducked down an alleyway into a cafe.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?